Good morning. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. I'm Len Edgerly. It is Wednesday, November 30th, 2022. I'm in Ocean Park, Maine at a cottage here. And it's a big day because this is the day that in approximately 3 hours, the embargo is going to lift on the Kindle Scribe review unit, which I've been using for 12 days now. So in this special episode of the podcast, I'm going to give you my first impressions, more than first impressions, because I've actually been using it regularly. And so I want to give you a feel for it. I'm also doing something unusual for this episode. I'm recording it for YouTube. I've got my iPhone set up on a little holder looking at me on the desk, and as I actually record the podcast on my MacBook Pro. Tech note, the Blue Yeti microphone is in the car being shipped to Florida, and I brought this little MicMe microphone, which I've used in the past for travel, but somehow it's just not working. And I spent a half an hour playing around with it before I figured, well, let's just go with the good old MacBook Pro microphone, which I think is pretty good quality, and it'll get the job done. So as I said, this review copy, I had a chance to see a Kindle Scribe briefly when Kevin Keith showed me one when I was in Seattle a couple of weeks ago. But he said I couldn't use it. I could just hold it. It wasn't for release for review copies at that point. But mine did arrive on Friday, November 18th, 12 days ago. The one that they sent me is the Scribe with the premium pen. And that's a stylus that comes with all of the e-ink tablets. And it has 16 gigabytes of memory. To buy this package, it also includes a power adapter when you buy it in the package. It's $449.97. And that comes with a cover, which I really like. This is a premium leather cover. It has a nice feel to it. This happens to be the dark emerald color to it, and what's very handy is that it very easily folds so that you can use it for to put it on a desk to read with, or if you flip it the other way, it gives you a nice inclined surface to write on. And so I really like this cover. It's one of the better designed covers I've seen for a tablet like this. What I would like to do is just to organize my thoughts. I used a Kindle Scribe notebook to organize my thoughts for this episode. And I want to talk about just kind of the look and feel of the Scribe, including the cover. Also the feel of the pen on the screen. That's pretty important on a device like this. I'll turn to the user interface and give you some sense of that, what the pen tools are like, what the UI is like for the use of the pen, notebook creation, organizing, how to share notebooks, and then also what it's like to read a Kindle book on this. It is, after all, a Kindle, and that's something that differentiates it from all of the other tablets that are available out there. And then I'll finish up by giving some thoughts about what I hope is coming in future improvements to the device. This is the Kindle Scribe first generation, as it's described, and that means that it is, when I remember the first generation of the Kindle, that clunky device, and now we're up to about 11 generations of the Kindle. I think it's helpful to see this device as a first generation device. And I'll say right out the start, this is a very strong first generation device, and I'll get into why I think that as we go along here. So let's talk about the look and the feel. It has, let's see, so the weight, if you take the Scribe itself out of the cover, the weight of it is 15.3 ounces, and it has a 10.2 diagonal size screen, so it's bigger than any other Kindle that we've seen so far. I think maybe the Kindle DX had one about that size. Of course, you couldn't write on it. It was just a way for reading. It's got a brilliant resolution 300 ppi screen, adjustable warm light. That means that if you have a Oasis or a Paperwhite, you know that you can change the actual color of the screen with a slider if you drop down the pull down menu, and it can be kind of a warm tone for reading at night, and then I usually prefer the black and white tone for during the day. And for each of those color settings, there's sliders to make it brighter or not. And there's it's a front-lit screen, of course. There's a USB-C connector. I think that's getting handier and handier. To most things just are using that form of the USB cable. It's asymmetrical, which means that now as I'm holding it, I'm right-handed. I'm holding it with my right hand, and there's enough of a margin on the right side of the screen to hold it without having to have my thumb over the screen. And everything's right side up as I do that. Now, if I get tired and I want to switch it to my left hand, then there's an accelerometer, I think it's called. It just flips the screen so that it's either way. And that's kind of handy. It gives you, if you're holding it in your hand without the cover, you've got two ways to do it, and it'll flip just to match either way. I'll put this back into the cover here so I can follow along in my notes. There are two kinds of the pen, and as I said, this one's shipped with the premium. I have to be careful. I've got so many different pens here. No, that's not the right pen. This is the Kindle pen. Yeah. This is a premium pen, and the distinction is it has an eraser. I mean, it's plastic, but if you want to erase something on your screen, you're writing along with the stylus, and then you just flip it like you would a pencil, and then if you make just the kind of motion you would with an eraser on a yellow pencil, it will erase whatever you wrote. And one thing that's kind of cool is you've got all these different templates, so you can pick different lines of to write on, and as you're erasing, the line will erase as you're erasing what you wrote on it, but then in a moment or two, the line reappears with nothing on it. That's kind of a nice feature of it. The other thing the premium pen has is a button, and for those of you viewing the YouTube, I'll hold this up. It's just a simple button down toward the front of the pen, and you can program that. I've got it set so if I'm writing with the pen and I hit that button, then the pen turns into a highlighter. And I could be, for example, if I'm reading a Kindle book, I just press the pen and all of a sudden I'm highlighting instead of writing. Then if I hit it again, it goes back to, now I may have to hold it to do that. You'll find that out if you get the premium pen. I recommend the premium pen. I think it's so handy to just be able to write and then turn it over. I think it's an extra $30 of cost. If you don't get the premium pen, if you're writing along, you would just have to tap somewhere on the screen to turn the pen itself into an eraser. You wouldn't be flipping over to the bottom of it. The look and feel of it, and I had this first impression when Kevin Keith handed me a Scribe back in Seattle. It's very thin. Did I write the dimensions down? Let's just say it's very thin, and it's very light. Without its case, it's under a pound. And when you feel it, I don't have the feelings I had of the first generation Kindle, which was kind of blocky and clunky. Of course, we didn't know. We hadn't seen all the rest of them. But this first generation starts out quite elegant in the feel of it. And the screen itself is it's brilliant, it's clear, it's fast, and it's very pleasing, I'll say that. Once you add the cover, you get a lot of functionality. As I said, you can, put it on a desk and read it, or you can use it to slant and make it better writing surface. It does add quite a bit of weight, and by the time you get this cover on, it adds 7 ounces, so you're up to about 1.5 pounds. if you're holding the Scribe with its cover, it's a little heavy. I've got to be careful not to wiggle the desk here because my iPhone holder is kind of bouncy. And but the next thing I want to talk about in the look and feel of it is the most important aspect of one of these tablets. And I have 3 others that I've tried, and in a later comparison video I'm going to talk about them. But it's the Boox Note Air made by Onyx, a Chinese company, the Kobo Elipsa, and the Remarkable, which has been kind of the dominant one for the last few years. And in each of those, the first thing I do is I open a document, and let's see, I think I'll just add a new one here. And well, I can just write on the notes I've got here. The first thing that I do when I test one of these is to write something. And you know immediately if it's pleasing. Okay, so I've got a blank page here. When I'm writing on the Scribe, the point of the stylus is actually, it runs out. If you're using it after a period of time, it'll get down to where you need to replace it, because it's some kind of material that as you are writing on the screen, it's kind of wearing out, and that's where you get this feel that it's very different from using an Apple Pencil on an iPad, which is a complete glassy surface, plastic on glassy surface. On these e-ink devices, they all use some form of this technology. So you're getting a pencil-like feel as you work along the screen, and it has to be instantaneous. On at least one of the devices, there's just this slight lag. So as you're writing, your hand and your pen is moving slightly faster than what you see on the paper. And of course, that's not the way it is with a real pencil and a real piece of paper. When you're on a piece of paper, as soon as you make that mark, it leaves its trail of carbon on the paper. And so I think for a device like this to start to make that equality with what we know and love, paper and pencil or pen and pencil, it's got to be instantaneous. No lag, no latency, as they call it. Now, the other thing that I've noticed is that when you design the screen and you design the stylus, there are very subtle differences in how much does it feel glassy? Does it feel sort of smooth and pleasing? And some of them seem a little on the glassy side. Some of them seem a little more paper-like. I think the Scribe is right at the sweet spot, because as I write, it feels comfortable. It doesn't feel digital, I guess I'll say. And so on that kind of nuanced quality, I think they've hit just the right spot. And let's see, no latency. Yeah, I think Amazon nailed the basics in creating something that you can write on. And I'm so pleased with that, because I think that's a high hurdle, especially something that's thin and this fast, and at the price point they're selling it at. I bet there were a lot of corners they could have cut that would have helped on some of those other dimensions, that would have shown up in, does this feel good? Does it feel good when you write it? And the answer to that question, in my opinion, is absolutely. It just feels terrific. Now, for the user interface, one thing which is totally distinctive on the Scribe is it can read your Kindle books, and it's and the way of navigating it is just like a Paperwhite, is just like a basic Kindle, is just like an Oasis. All of the e-ink devices, if you've used one, you once you turn to reading your books or getting into your, I have trouble making this visible for the video. You don't have to learn a new user face. It's if you're at the home screen. You're looking at your recent items, and all of the usual things are kind of helping you find the next thing to buy from them. And along the bottom, just like in the other Kindles, it says Home, Library, and then there's a little thumbnail of the page that you're looking on. And then the only new thing is there's a new tab at the bottom titled Notebooks. And that's where, if you're finished reading your Kindle book, you've been reading, taking advantage of the nice big text, and I got to remember, I got to work on that outline I'm doing for the podcast. You tap up top, just like the way you always do for your Kindle things. You tap Home, and then you go to tap Notebooks down at the bottom, and you can go back to the document you were doing or create a new one. So that's a big advantage of this device if you come to it from having spent a lot of time reading on a Kindle, and you're going to find your way around this device, the Scribe, in a way that's very easy. I think that's a good thing. And here we go. So let's go back into TKC 702, and we were talking about the interfaces just like a Kindle, and and the other thing that's just like the Kindle is, if you tap on the top of the screen, you get that drop down that gives you where you control the brightness and the color. All of that is the same if you're doing a notebook as opposed to reading a book. I think I'm going to do a video that gives a real demo of the user face, but I think because some of you are listening to this as opposed to seeing it on the video, and plus I'm not really set up to share my screen with the video on this sometimes bouncing arm I've got for the iPhone. But let me talk in just overall terms. Each of these devices, when you get into a document, give you different kinds of tools. You've got the same kind of a stylus, but it does different things depending on the different devices. And I think that the Scribe has started out with a good solid set of things that you can do with the pen. You can set different widths of the line as you're drawing. You can change it to a highlighter. There's 5 different gradations for the width of your line. And when I make a note from my morning journal, the Alexa Flash Briefing I do each weekday on my iPad, I always make the title in the biggest, widest choice I have for the Apple Pencil, and it's bold, and I just feel like, okay, there's the title. Same thing for the Kindle Chronicles, TKC 701. Then I I usually shift to the one step up. I don't like the thinnest one, which is called Fine. I like the one that's one up, and it's titled Thin. So again, you're getting the ability with the settings on how the Scribe pencil works to make it feel just the way you want it, and different people will want one of these 5 settings. The eraser, if you have the premium pen, the eraser, if you're using it with a basic pen, it'd be the same as the premium pen, but you can erase things even if you don't have that premium pen. You get some settings. Again, you get to say from fine to heavy. In other words, is the point of your stylus a big fat eraser, or is it a very precise little eraser? And depending on what you're trying to erase, that's a handy thing to be able to do. There's also a choice to erase selection. And this gets to something which some of the other tablets like Remarkable have a few more choices than the Scribe does. And I hope that in a future update of the Scribe, they add the ability to circle something on a notebook that you're writing and then move it. It's sometimes you want to add something in, and it's nice because if you choose that selection tool, you can identify something, and then you can cut and paste it too. You can say cut here and drop it over here. The Scribe has something close to that, but it's a little crude. You have the ability with the eraser to choose erase selection. Now, at the point that you choose that, you don't have a selection. I think that's a little clunky. But if you have something on your notebook and you want to erase it, and you don't want to use the eraser, maybe it's like a big section, you tap on Erase Selection, and then your scribe, you just draw around the area that you want to erase, and as soon as you complete the circle selecting it, it disappears. It's not cut and paste, it's just gone. Handy, and that's good to have. But I hope that's kind of a first generation version of what you can do with selection and cut and paste and things like that. There's also a pointer selection, and that just enables you to scroll your document or move the pages and do whatever you want to do. You can, with the eraser, you can also erase a page. So if you've got a whole page you want to get rid of, very easy to do. I'll talk now about notebook creation. It's pretty simple, and organizing. When you create a notebook, you get 18 selections of what the page is going to look like. Is it going to be lined, just straight lines? Is it going to be blank, so it's a totally white space? I found one as I was working on the show last night to what I was going to talk to you about, and it looks like the kind of thing you might get if you're organizing a PowerPoint demonstration, because you got these big blocks on the left of the page, and they give you sort of your top line categories, and then you've got something over to the right. You've got some lines where you can fill in the details of it. I haven't ever used something like that. That might exist on some of the other tablets, but it's a nice choice. There are some templates that give you like to-do lists, little check marks that you can check in when you finish your to-do list. But anyway, 18 choices there. And I think it's either 8 or 18. I've got my notes here, but I think it's 18. There's quite a few of them. And okay, so I'm looking at my notes. You can create folders. Let's go to that. If you have a bunch of things that are in a certain category, like in my case, TKC is stuff that is for the Kindle Chronicles, I've got a folder, and I can drop several notebooks into that folder. I can't nest the folders. In other words, I can't have a TKC folder and then a folder just for a certain episode. But that's okay. It's a handy little thing to keep. If you've got a ton of notebooks on your scribe, it's nice to be able to gather them into folders, and they've done that pretty well. Notebook sharing is an area that I think is going to, well, I know it's going to be improved, because Kevin has said that early next year there's going to be the ability to have what you do on your scribe in terms of annotations, and I think probably as notebooks will be able to be picked up by the Kindle app on, say, an iPad or an iPhone or an Android device, and that's going to give you the ability to capture the things that you're writing on the scribe on other devices. The other thing you can do with a notebook at this point is at the top of the document that you're doing or the notebook, if you tap in a little box that looks like one of those sharing boxes, then you have two choices, and mine is do a quick send of this to my email, or do a quick send to up to 5 people's emails, and then you'll get a screen and you can say, all right, I want this notebook to go to these 5 people. Click, it goes. Obviously, you have to have the scribe connected to Wi-Fi in order to do that. The annotations are something which I ran into a problem with, and I think it's a useful one. It was resolved. I had a manuscript of a friend of mine, Betsy, who has actually she's a finalist for a good University of Wisconsin Manuscript Prize. So she sent me this large manuscript and said, I'm thinking of some changes for the final thing. And I was able to get that document, it was a Word document, onto my scribe, but I had to back around. I had to use Calibre. I made a PDF. For some reason, it wasn't simple for me just to get that Word document onto my scribe. Now, I think that's something that early next year is going to be addressed in an update. Kevin has said that Microsoft Word is going to have a much easier way to move from a computer or anywhere else onto the Scribe, and that'll be helpful. But in my case, when I finally did get the PDF onto my Scribe, I was able to annotate it, and I thought, great, I've got this just what I want to do. I want to make some comments on the poems and suggest, well, maybe this one, maybe not that one. And then when I got done, I couldn't find a way to send it to her. And I tried all different ways, and then I got in touch with Alex McClure, the public relations guy who's been so helpful to me in this. And he said, there's a little box up in the top. And I looked at the document, and I said, well, there isn't a little box. I sent him the screen share. And then I said, well, I have another PDF on my Scribe. It was a 99-page insurance policy for our home in Sanibel, which, it's a Lloyd's of London policy that's 99 pages. And believe me, I've been reading that thing pretty closely these days because I've got a bit of an issue with what can be in my claim. But I had annotated that, and sure enough, at the top of the document, there was a little box, and I could share it. I could send it back to my email. I could do whatever I want with it. But on that PDF, it was easy to share. On the PDF that I had kind of made in a circuitous route, somehow it hadn't, maybe the Scribe software said, this isn't a real PDF, or this doesn't meet these kinds of parameters that we are going to treat it like a PDF and therefore make it easy to send. Handling PDFs is always tricky, and different interfaces. It's never a slam dunk. But I'm glad that for at least one PDF, I was able to make annotations on the Scribe, send it off very easily. Because that's, if you couldn't do that, and for when I was first addressing this, I thought, good grief, they put this thing out and you can annotate and do stuff, but you can't get, what's the point if you can't share it with anybody? That's not the case. You definitely can. If you find out you're having trouble with the PDF, you might have to get a different version of the PDF. And this is going to be getting easier and easier as time goes on. Now, my Scribe screen has gone into sleep mode. There's a button here on the left side, which if I press, I can get right back and see what we're going to talk about next. Importing documents to the Scribe. The best way to do that now is something you may have already done with your other Kindles if you're doing it. I've done it a lot. Say you have a PDF and you want to get it onto your Scribe as opposed to your Paperwhite. If you're like me, you have several of these devices. So what I did was I went into the part of my account, which I use my computer to do this. It's called Manage My Content and Devices. And this is a very handy place where you can see what's on your different Kindles. You can see where the documents are that you've done. And so in that, if you dig around, you'll find a list of the email addresses of each of your devices. And in the case of the Scribe, when it arrived, it said it was kind of a complicated address. It was something at Kindle.com. And you can edit that. So I went in and I just changed to something that I could remember easily. So it was that at Kindle.com. So that became the address of my Scribe. At that point, I could go in and take a PDF and I think maybe a Word document. I'm not sure at this point, but whatever format the Scribe can handle, I was able to just attach it to an email, send it to mysoandso at Kindle.com, and I'd say in, half a minute, depending on the size of the file, it would show up on the Scribe, and I could, open it up, I could annotate it, I could do whatever I wanted. There's Remarkable has the ability at this point, and I may have missed this in all of my time. When I write something on the Remarkable, it's instantly paired with my Remarkable app on my computer. So I don't have to be sending back and forth. If I have something and I drop it there, it just populates to the device itself. I feel sure the Scribe may already do that and I just missed it, or as they send out these updates next year, it's going to be easier and easier to access notebooks and annotated Kindle books on various devices. Let's turn to reading books, because that is, of course, what Kindles are for. That's what the first generation Kindle in 2007 opened up for us. And it's a pretty cool experience to read a book on the Kindle Scribe. And you have a big screen, of course, and so that you can set your type at a nice big brightness. You can pick all of that, and then when you've got it the way you want it, this is a book called Necessary Errors that I'm reading, that Tomasz, the guy that interviewed me at Amazon, put me on. Good book about an expat in Czechoslovakia. It's a very pleasing view of the text, and you don't have to turn the pages often. There's more words. Sometimes I've thought, well, that was a big advantage of a Kindle, that I wasn't seeing so many words at once, and maybe I read more carefully that way. And if I want to highlight, I can do it with my finger, or I can do it with the pen. One use case which worked out well for me that I was pleased with is I have a elliptical machine at the garage in Cambridge, and I can work out there even on a cold day. It's an unheated garage. It's a little chilly, but when I do that, I can use the cover of the Scribe and just loop it over there's kind of a screen that the elliptical has, so I'm looping the cover over to hold it in place, and it's just rock solid. It just stays there, and I'm at a certain distance. I can set the type just the way I want it, and it's a great way to read while I'm doing my half-hour huffing and puffing on the elliptical. And sometimes I think, oh, I've got a half an hour there in the garage. I'm going to queue up something on Netflix on my iPad, and that'll pass the time. I find that when I've got a good book and I put it on the Scribe flipped over on the elliptical screen, the time goes faster. I'm sort of in the book and I'm reading, and next thing you know, you're halfway through. And that would be true, of course. I could make the same choice on an iPad, switch to the Kindle app on the iPad, but it passes that test. And then another time I appreciated the reading process on the Scribe was yesterday. I was a little tired, and when we drove up from Cambridge to here in Ocean Park, Maine, Darlene was driving, and so I was the passenger, and I was reading the Scribe. And when you're reading in a car, I always used to get a little car sick, but the little screen, there was something about having the big Scribe screen in my lap. Sophie was in my lap as well, our dog. It was a better way to read. It just seemed like this kind of works. It feels more stable, or it was just a very pleasant way to read. The times that I use the Scribe to read, they're going to be daytime, I'm sure. It's a little heavy. At night, I have the basic Kindle, and most of the time I'm using the basic Kindle now. It's so light and so small. So the weight of it, especially with the case, there are times it's too much weight. What did I do when I was reading 400-page books on paper? They weigh a lot too. But the reading experience is really cool. Now, the thing that is, I think, still an issue, and it sounds like it was an issue in the team that designed the Kindle, because Kevin was talking about this. I had hoped that when this device hit, and this is something I've been sort of hoping for quite a time, that when I brought my Kindle book up on my screen and I had my stylus, if I wanted to, instead of highlighting with the stylus, I could just draw a line under a passage, and then I could just write something in the margin. I've done this ever since high school, and maybe I'm unusual. Maybe people don't do that, but it's just part of my reading process, and it helps me think. The way that, and that's a tricky thing to do, because if I've got the font at a certain size and I underline something and I highlight, and then for whatever reason I say, well, I'd like to read this in a bigger font or a smaller font. What I've done on the with the Scribe pen, it could be just sort of skewed. You know, the line that used to be under the line in the smaller font, it's going to be floating somewhere, or the note I wrote isn't going to show up in exactly the right place. And I haven't seen any tablet that handles this fluidly to where you can write something on a book page and it will just sort of collapse or expand as you do the fonts. There's different workarounds on it. Well, the workaround that the Kindle team chose was to use something called sticky notes. And what this is if I want to annotate, if I want to write something, I tap on the screen, and then it comes up with a good-sized window that I can write in. And I'll show you what that window looks like for the video here. But it's pretty cool, because once you do that spot where you're you have something that you're doing. Okay, so I'm creating a note. So now when I create a note, on the previous Kindles, you could create a note and you'd have that little keyboard that would show up, and you'd have to kind of, hunt and peck for the letters, and it did have autofill, but it was slow and not very pleasing way to be working on a note. Now, you can do that. If you create a note, I'll show the screen here. It has two choices. One is text, and one is, what do they call it? Handwritten note. And if you choose handwritten note, you've got all the same choices of your pen that you do in the notebook. You can change the width of it, and I can write a great big note. I can do a smiley face. I can be very creative in the note that I'm putting at that specific spot of the book. I've tried this a little bit, and one thing I sometimes like to do when I'm reading is just like go off. If a book is irritating me or I'm thinking something, and I'll do kind of what I call free write. It's like a morning journal way of writing, where I'm just letting my subconscious have its say, and I can be writing. And to be able to do that quickly, fluidly with the pen, as opposed to having to type on that little keyboard, that's an improvement. And I think it might be that I will learn new ways of using the sticky note as a way to annotate the book. And then when I want to see the highlights of the book, which I sometimes do if I'm preparing for an author interview, I'll be able to just pull all of those out, and I'll see highlighted passages, and I'll see the sticky notes. I'll see some little scribble that I made at a certain point in the book, and that could be very useful. So I think it's a solid way to start out annotating books. I had thought maybe the publishers were a barrier to this. I thought, gee, all right, if you say you can annotate a book and then somehow it can stay with the book, is that something that publishers, are saying, no, that's violating something? But Kobo has a way of doing it with its books, and they're, doing books from the same publishers, and they're you can write in a Kobo book the way I'm talking about. I can underline, I can do notes. If I change the font, they say this note was written in a different font, tap here to see it. So they're not expanding and doing that really tricky thing which I was talking about. But they apparently were able to do that and still, have the same, or a very similar set of books from the big publishers that Amazon has. So I don't think it's an intellectual property issue. I think it's an engineering issue, and I think that'll be something that Amazon might have as a future choice. I certainly hope so. But I like the sticky notes. I think that's in this, as well as other choices that they made, they got the basics right. To start out with, the first generation Kindle Scribe. They made it the right size. They made it a good weight. They made the pen work fantastic. They made it able to read all of your Kindle books. All of these things that just had to be done right have been done right. And what happens next, I kind of compare it to our Tesla. We've had 4 Teslas, and we got a Model 3 as soon as they were available. And the Tesla starts out, it's a pretty good car. It's not a Mercedes. You feel like you're kind of in a spaceship. You're in a functional vehicle as opposed to the lap of luxury, at least in the Model Y that we're driving. But it had all the gear, it had all the sensors and everything. The seats are comfortable. And then over time, they kept updating it. I chose the autopilot, which was at the time I got it, it was a $10,000 increase. It's now up to 15. And gradually, that just got better and better. There was more it can do. I now have the fully self-driving, which I think is too aggressive a name for it. But basically, I can drive any street in that car because of things they did with the software. I didn't ever have to go to a dealer and say, do this brand new thing that you can do. It all came in over the internet. And it's a great feeling. I feel like, compared to the cars of yore, I'm driving something which starts out good, strong, and is just going to keep getting better. And I think, obviously, Amazon's done that with all of the previous Kindles, and there's no reason to think that they won't with the Scribe. And that'll be fun. It'll be great because there'll be little updates to the app, or these things will kind of arrive. It used to be you'd go in and you'd find the update, or I would, and then side load it from my computer. These updates come pretty naturally these days. You'd have to be plugged into Wi-Fi. But I suspect, a year from now, there will be things that this scribe that I have here will be able to do that it can't do now. And I'm looking forward to that. I guess that's about it. I am going to do a video. We're going to Florida tomorrow. We were able to rent a house 2 houses down from ours, which is damaged by the hurricane, so that we can't live in it. That's something I'm talking to my insurance company about, is they're dragging their feet on paying for the rental that I think they really need to, according to the policy. But anyway, we'll be down in Florida tomorrow, and then next week, well, I'll be set up. I'll have my Blue Yeti microphone, everything, all the gear will be there because we'll pick up the car at the airport. I'd like to just do a video that has a good view of these devices. I'll line up the 4 tablets and show you, what are the choices that each of the designers of these other tablets made, and how they kind of set a context for the Scribe. And it might be that you might want the Remarkable. I'd say that of the 4, the Remarkable is the best alternative to the Kindle Scribe at this point. I'm not going to be able to read my Kindle books on it. I mean, there might be workarounds using Caliber and who knows what to do it. But that part of it, the Scribe just owns. But the Remarkable's done a very nice job with, all of the UI choices. They've been at it 2 or 3 years now, so they're a little further down the road. I'm sure they hear big footsteps behind them as the Scribe hits. And I see they're doing a lot of advertising on Twitter about the Remarkable and the latest version of it. So that's an interesting comparison, to compare the Scribe with the Remarkable. And then the Kobo, I didn't really spend much time on because the action of the pen was so poor. The latency, and you'd write something and it just didn't turn out right. So yeah, they can let you annotate their Kobo books in a way I like, but if I can't get the pen to do what I want it to do, it's just sort of a failed state when it comes to an e-ink tablet. The Boox one is pretty interesting. Onyx, a lot of the instructions are in Chinese, so but it's very light. It seems fast. It does pass that comfort test with the pen, and that's one I haven't experimented enough to really have in-depth opinion. It appears to have lots of different choices. It's a more complicated interface that could be useful in some circumstances. But anyway, that's the plan. Sometime next week, I'll have a video up talking to you about those 4 tablets. And then the other one that's there is, my good old iPad Pro, which I've used as my creative device. Up until now, what I've done is the iPad Pro is where I'm creative. When I go to notes and I do my notes in the morning journal, I can set different colors of the pen. I can move things around. I can have the one side of the screen be a book that I've read, so I can highlight chapters and move it over. It's just such a fluid, powerful space to create in that I kind of prefer it, even after having played with the Scribe. I have been making my notes in the Scribe this past week, but you just can't beat the power of what you can do on an iPad. It feels like this glassy connection between the pencil and the screen. I don't like that. I sort of have gotten used to it. But what I've done up until the Scribe is I would use the iPad for a lot of things, including making notes for a show like this. When I had to analyze something, something maybe with my dad, I help him with his finances, and we just get to figure out, what's the right way to go on an insurance policy, or how do I organize his insurance policies. Something that's going to take sort of the left side of my brain. I pick up the Remarkable, and I've kind of trained myself that when I have that device, I can't do anything except think in a logical way in black and white with this pencil. I can't be jumping around and checking different things. It's just my mind connecting to a screen with a pencil, like a pad of paper. And I found that very helpful. It gets to be kind of like the scarecrow getting a brain. There's a placebo effect that I've started to have as part of my repertoire, where if and I tend to think I'm more of a right brain guy. So if I'm analyzing something, I have a little bit of anxiety. I'm not as good at this as my father was. But if I get my Remarkable tablet going and I start a document about something, I can pretty well get to where I need to get. So, I think I'll probably be just switching to the Scribe for that. But it's going to be a little complicated because the Scribe is also where I read books, or I could read books. And it might be that I just have the Scribe be the new place that my left brain hangs out or goes to think things through. So I'm going to have a kind of a fun time figuring out how this new device is going to play its part in my arsenal of creativity. For me, creativity with technology, I've always loved gadgets. So the fun comes in sometimes with the gadget. And when there's a new gadget, something new that Notes can do, or an iPad Pro, and I want to create something, the fun of the creative tool sort of kickstarts my whole process and makes me think, boy, I'm having fun here. I'm going to, create, I'm going to use these blocks to come up with the different topics I'm going to talk about in the podcast. So I have the opportunity now to sort of reboot how I'm looking at these various devices. And I'll have to find a home for these other 3 tablets. I really don't need 4 e-ink tablets for my creative devices, other than talking to you about them and sharing my impressions of their pros and cons. Today, the embargo lifts in, let's see what time. It lifts in about 2 hours, 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm going to go up to the other cottage where my sister is, because there's faster internet there, and I'll get the podcast up. I'll hopefully can get this long video up on YouTube as well. And it's been fun to be back in journalistic mode, getting ready for the lifting of an embargo. Always kind of a cool thing for for a tech journalist. I hope this has been helpful to you, and if you've got a scribe ordered, I think they start shipping today, so yours may show up today in time to, take into account some of the things I've said, and I really would love to hear comments from you, just things that I've said, or if you have a scribe, things that you've learned that it does that you like or you don't like, and we'll have a chance to be part of the sending of responses back to the Kindle team as this goes forward, and I know they're going to be working on improving this first generation product, which has so much potential and has really has exceeded my hopes and expectations. If you have any comments, you can send them to me at podchronicles@gmail.com. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my podcast. Hope this has been helpful. Have a great day.